Welcome to another episode of Freaky Friday. Talked to you guys a little bit in the last episode about a little bit, touched to think a little bit on just about almost everything. We'll keep doing that, asking ourselves important questions. Today I want you guys to ask yourselves, where did I come from? Where did we come from? What's the meaning to all this? What's your purpose? And I think a lot of people forget their purpose. And I hope through listening to me talk and sorting things out and trying to find truth, you'll try to maybe find your purpose. Thank you for tuning in. This episode is called What Hole Did We Go In? Sometimes places and all the time places. Sometimes places and all the times places. It's funny that I talk about this. It really is. A lot of people would never put their minds to an understanding of it or try to understand it because, well, it truly is impossible. I watched a documentary, and my cousins are really smart people, really gifted. A lot of my brothers and family members, very gifted people, very intelligent. And he comes to me and talks about this guy who was like over in the UK or something, and he was plowing this field, and this all of a sudden there was this bright flash of light. And you'll hear about these bright flashes of light, a bright flash of light, someone disappears, a bright flash of light, someone reappears, something reappears, but these bright flashes of light. And this Indian just appears out of nowhere, and that's what he said. He looked like an Indian, and the farmer and the authorities got a hold of him, and it's like nobody could understand what this guy was saying, and they called in experts, and then those experts called in experts and experts from around the world, but nobody could figure out what he was saying. But he was able to draw, and he drew this line straight down the middle of the paper. And on one side was the farmer and a crude tractor, and on the other side there was these strange trees and these animals with multiple legs, and him and these people and whatnot, and what seemed to be strange buildings. And he even wrote down like almost what looked like hieroglyphics, and no one could understand it. And they, put him in a safe place, and because nobody could figure out what or who he was. And of course, everyone always goes to the extreme that it could be, the really bad T word, and it could be just a bad person. Everyone always assumes the worst and never expects the best. So, but there was a bright flash of light, and the man disappeared right in the middle of a cell, and it was just a very strange story. All right, very strange. And I told you guys I'd tell you freaky stories and freak you out, so that's where we're going to go, because you're no longer in Kansas. You've went down the rabbit hole with me. Now, sometimes places and all the times places, you'll hear about these growing up, and some people, being a truth seeker, it will stick very firm in their mind, and other people, it will go in one ear and right out the other. Such places like the Bermuda Triangle. There's a place in Nevada, the Skinwalker Ranch. There's places, in the world that are just strange, and these are what's called a sometimes place, because sometimes things happen there. An all the time place is kind of like where you're at right now. If you look around you, it's basically an all the time place. And if you think about this sometimes, if you think about the Skinwalker Ranch, it said that they encountered giant wolf-like dogs there, like almost dire wolves from a prehistoric era. Even saw, reptiles and creatures that were invisible and actually seemed to have a mind of their own. Imagine, I talked about this in the last episode. If you start to link the pieces together and use that little bit of humanity that you still have left inside of you, to just link it together before you fall into a deeper slumber and start going, wow, That really happened, and that really reminded me of this. And boy, can that be a coincidence? It says that the greatest trick evil ever did was to convince man and everything that it didn't exist. And it depends on what your perception is of good and evil. Because if you were to ask me what good and evil was, I'd have to tell you I don't know. Because I've never been taught it for real. I really don't know. You have to ask yourself, do you understand what good and evil is? Because really, I don't think a lot of us do. And then it goes into your head, well, right from wrong, right? That's what you're thinking right now, all of you, right from wrong. Well, do you know right from wrong? I asked you, do you know right from wrong? And if you did, would you follow right from wrong? It's funny, the duality of man, you see it all over the place. You see the duality all over the place. The sun rises, the sun falls, light and dark. Every day we're hit with it over and over and over again. Light and dark. It's black, it's light. It's black, it's white. There are places in the world that are just sometimes places. And it's said that they followed tracks that led into a wall and went nowhere. You hear about these mansions that people say the spirits helped them build. Like the Winchester mansion, she said the spirits came to her and people would tie ropes to themselves and it would just be going into a wall. It's like it was shape-shifting, it was changing. That's a sometimes place. And once you come to the understanding of that, the veil will start to lift off your guys' eyes and your soul, and you'll start to be able to see the sometimes places. A lot of people don't understand this, but a lot of the time when they call them demons, people don't realize what they are, that they're elemental creatures, okay? They're elemental beings. And once you start to put yourself into the perception of reality that everything was created by a word, by a vibration, that we all vibrate. All of our DNA, it vibrates, and it talks to each other. If you start to study mitochondria, or maybe you've played the video game Parasite Eve, it has a mind of its own. I'm not even going to say it almost has a mind of its own. Science will say it has a mind of its own. It's really what's controlling you. And people are like, oh, I was attracted to this person, and oh, we ended up together, and these people just fit so right. And once you guys stop thinking about just your normal mortal thoughts and think about what your body is doing, and it's communicating, they're all communicating, you're all communicating with each other on such a high level, such a high frequency, you can't understand it, just like you can't hear your heartbeat. But if you did, it would drive you nuts. You heard your blood flowing in your veins all the time, it would drive you nuts. I might be a little scattered sometimes. I lose my train of thought a lot. Some of you out there are probably going to like it. Some of you out there probably aren't going to like it. That's just a thing, man. People have such a hard time coexisting. And we're stronger together. Just like in this whole, we're stronger together. Because if we get separated from one another, then I'm going to lose you. And you're going to lose me. And hopefully we find our way back to the surface. It's hard to accept things outside of yourself or accept things outside of your pride or your ego. And really, I don't like the words. I don't like talking about those things. I truly don't. I don't like it when people are like, oh, you had such an ego. And it's like, and you don't really know this person. A lot of people even think they've spent years with someone. Do you truly know that person inside and out? But you get to talk about their ego. How selfish was that? How big is your ego? And then it just becomes a division. It becomes an argument. People are like, oh, well, some people on one side of the fence are like, oh, well, love oneself. And on the other side, they're like, no, don't love oneself. For the love of self is evil. And I don't think truly people understand good and evil anymore. I don't think they want to understand. And most people, once they start hearing the truth or they see something scary, they want to look away. They want to hide. Such as back in the day, they said, be in square. Be there, be square. Or you're in a box. And someone else can tell you that they're looking at you through the glass. And they really don't know how much time has last. But it feels like forever. And you look through this box, you look at all these people in this box, and you're like, man, I really love that person. How do I pull them out? There's a fire on this other side of this box. They don't say, how do I get this person out of this box? It's not up to you to pull them out of the box. It's up to them to walk out of that box and then look in that box and see where everybody is and that you're trapped. And if you don't think for a second them scientists don't know about sometimes places and all the time places, you should get on the internet and start looking up their research about extra dimensional spaces. That's a funny word right there. A lot of old timers and people, when I talk to them, they're like, man, you use a lot of really big words. See, people, they weren't raised with the internet like all of us was. There's just like this explosion of knowledge all of a sudden. Man, the internet's doing all kinds of things. It's been teaching people different languages, teaching people about other people's cultures, connecting us. I wonder if people really appreciate it for what it is. I wonder if people know what it really is, and it's hard to explain it. You know, some people say the internet's alive. Could you imagine being an artificial intelligence and it being able to compute all the knowledge of all the humans in the world and have all of their thoughts in about 10 seconds? Poof. There it was. Every video game you ever played, every thought you ever had, anything, just poof, it can do it. That's an incredible thought, right? And we seek to understand that and higher things. A lot of people won't accept it. They're like, no, the truth will never come to me. It will if you will it to. If you want it to, if you reach out with sincerity in your heart, it will come to you. You don't have to ask anybody to do it. You just have to reach out with sincerity in your heart. They say that if you put love into the universe will respond back and give you love. And if you put hate out into the universe will respond back and give you hate. All right? It's a double-edged sword. When we talk about purpose, what is the purpose? What is the meaning? I don't know. I know, and sometimes when I start to think about it, I hear the purpose is just to live as good and as peacefully as you can. I think a lot of people underestimate that word, purpose, and live their day-to-day lives not really for anybody else, but for them, for their children, for them, for what they have found in their selves to be their purpose. And I don't believe that anybody's purpose is quite all the same. Some people are very simple and some people are very noble. Some people are silly and some people are very slow. Some people are fast. Some people are strong. Some people are weak. Like I was talking about, a lot of division. Some people speak other languages. Some people think differently. And it would be a really funny purpose in life to try to tell everybody to put down the differences you have been given and accept it for what it really is. And I can't stand it when people start to cram religion down people's throats. I can't stand it when people are like, I'm right, you're wrong. I just cannot stand it. People really need to just find it in themselves. And you have to remember, in the words of one of my very good Canadian friends, I know he wouldn't mind it if I said it, but his name is Shiggy. And he said to me, Prince, why do you always have to interfere? Why couldn't we have just watched? Why did we have to save that guy's life? We were playing this video game with dinosaurs, right? And he's like, don't you understand, as he laughs, some people just want to watch the world burn? And it was like, it was just such a profound statement. And we all know, all of us should know, anybody who's, a little bit of nerd or geek. Oh, there goes those labels again, guys. Instantly in your head, what do you think of? It's like something negative, something bad. There's nothing wrong with geeks and nerds. Again, it's just another word. It's just another label, to put on people to hurt their feelings. And a lot of the things that you've been taught in society is to hurt another one's feelings. And there are going to be people out there, probably right now, you're like, feelings? I don't care about anybody else's feelings. Well, then don't be surprised when they don't care about yours. You guys are being an amazing audience. I hope that you hold very firmly and tightly. And there's a lot of things that I'll just keep talking about because it's funny with time. We seem to have, forever a lot of time. And I don't want to waste any of your time. So I'll just keep talking. It might be a little scattered. But I talked a little bit in the last episode about the dirty man that walked into the bar. And I forgot to even tell you that the guy, when he told me, he said he had teeth. He said he had fangs. And back when I was growing up, I heard a lot of stories on the news about vampire attacks, about people that had strange bites on them, and they would woke up in a daze in a barn. And a lot of people are like, oh, I know a lot about vampires. I know, a lot about it. And they're like, they just instantly go to the movies. And they don't set aside their belief for a split second that these people might have known something so ancient that they can not only take advantage of you, but take advantage of me and take advantage of everybody else and lead you in a completely wrong direction. But where do the stories come from, I wonder? Ancient legends would talk about, vampires, these bloodsuckers that would bury themselves in sacred ground. That was sacred to them somehow, like it made them more powerful, that they would bury themselves underground. And it's funny that the guy talked about the guy with teeth and wild eyes, and that he was very dirty and smelled like death, because they say that they smell bad. If you've ever been around a corpse or something, or you live out in the country, you run across an animal that's been dead for a while, it just doesn't smell good. And it's funny that we talk about Freaky Friday. What really freaks you out the most? A real funny joke would say, have you ever really looked in the mirror? Never really looked deep down inside of yourself? About what lurks inside your soul and in your heart. Real deep. It's funny, in the world that we live in today, it's like everything is backwards and nobody realizes it. The things that you should fear are becoming your good guys. And I don't know if anybody's quite putting that together. There was a movie, like you hear a lot about the name Dracula. In the movie Dracula Untold, where somebody makes a deal with the devil, as they like to call it. I don't like putting real labels on things, but people identify, easier. And so, he makes a deal to save his own people. Then all of a sudden everyone's like, well, if I make a deal with it, I'm going to save people. And I don't think anybody truly understands, and all of a sudden this dude's your hero, right? And I think really the story of Dracula, I'll talk on that sometime, the stuff I've heard, different stories about the guy, It's pretty serious stuff, man. Like, if you just do your research. A lot of people claim that they know about vampires. And that they say that vampires, they say that they could shapeshift. Could you imagine somebody that could shapeshift into like a bird or a wolf or a bat? Like, and a lot of times, in our cartoons and stuff, we see it and we just laugh about it. And what if, it's true? We couldn't even fathom it or just even understand that. I do believe they probably exist. That's no joke. Just been desensitized and told they don't. So therefore you believe they don't. And then they start to get away with it. And one by one, it happens. I told everybody, I've been saying it for years, I said eventually the powers that shouldn't be are gonna schmuck somebody so bad. They're gonna go after them so hard that they're gonna turn. They're gonna be like, all right then. We're just gonna start telling the whole world the truth, and we have the internet. You know, everybody has the power to fight back. And Roseanne's a perfect example of that. I hope I don't get sued for saying that, man. Poor Roseanne, what they did to her. Look up some of her videos, guys, gals. Look what she says about being hoodwinked. And you gotta be careful what you say. You gotta be very careful. She's a perfect example. They'll make an example out of you. They will schmuck you. They'll take you down. And that's another thing, is people are living in fear. They live in fear and claim that they're free. I'm sure a lot of you enjoy my stories, so I'll keep telling them. We talked about elementals today. And elementals is a funny one to start to understand. It's a pretty serious thing, actually. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people have been got by these things. Maybe in a reference to some people out there, if you guys have ever seen the movie Ghost Rider, with the guy whose head is on fire. And you think about the demons in that movie and how they were portrayed, and then you think about when I say elementals. A long time ago, and this is a true story, the wind started to blow really terrible, and it rained for like 4 days straight. And we had these willow trees at my house. And anybody's ever had a willow tree for a long time know that they're like trash trees. Really fun to play under. They're really beautiful, but man, after a good windstorm, it just wrecks your yard. I spent hours growing up picking limbs out of the yard. And so this windstorm came, the storm came, and it just trashed the property. And we went down front of my house, and there's a creek that runs in front of my house. And there's a pond, and you know, there's a drainage pipe, and it runs underneath the road. So if you guys look, you'll see that pipe right here. I'll put you there to tell you the story. Okay, so we walked down there, and I was babysitting my cousin. My parents and his mother had they needed a break, and they decided to go on a trip, and decided me old enough and mature enough, and I thought it was a real honor to be babysitting my little cousin. And he was a very quiet kid, not stupid by any sort of the means, just very quiet. And he was one of my really good friends too. So we went down there, and there was this big willow tree, and we just started putting this big pile. We thought, well, we want to at least impress the parents, impress the guardians. So as soon as they come in, they're going to see that we made an effort. We did something good. And when we were down there, we started cleaning up. It started to get nighttime out. And from underneath that hole, it used to be round. They redid it. Underneath that hole, there was this whimpering like a dog. And I've always been a huge animal lover. I've always really respected animals. And it was whimpering, and I went to go towards it, and my little cousin, and he must have only been 9, maybe 8 or 9, maybe younger. He was like, no, cuz, no. And I was like, well, I want to make sure, and as you heard from my first broadcast, I've always been a truth seeker, and I wanted to go and look and see for myself. And that was before the age of cell phones, and we didn't have flashlights. We were just going to work till dark. It was like just a spur of the moment, weird, freaky thing. So I started taking more steps, and he started getting more eager. And then we heard it. We both heard it. It sounded like the voice of a little girl, and it said, help me. And I immediately got scared. I mean, the hairs on my arm stood up. I cannot tell you guys the fear that instantly came over me, and the words that ran through my mind were, what the? And then now my cousin's crying, and he is really tugging on my arm. Cuzzo, please, come on, let's just go. And we went back up to the house. I didn't push it any further. It felt very off. It scared me for a long time. Still does. But that's not the freakiest part of that story. As I talk about elementals, right, and beings from other dimensions, beings from other places, maybe even other places in what we call time. And in thinking that everything is infinite, you know. I had gotten in some trouble. Just my anger got the best of me, and some guys just so happened to pick on me the right way, tried jumping me in a bar, and I fought back. And I went in trouble. I got in a lot of trouble for it. And I ended up going to prison. Because you got to remember that it's always the person who wins the fight who gets in trouble. Remember that. It takes a bigger man to turn and walk away. I got in trouble and went to prison for a few years. And when I was in prison, I was so bored, I ended up finding a library. And of course, even the library was a corrupted place, and which really sucked. And I was even made fun of for even going to the library. But I did it anyways, to entertain and train my mind. And I came across this book. It was a leather-bound book called Polish Fairy Tales. And it said it was written by a vampire. It was really cool. I ended up working my way into the law library, and because I frequented the library quite often. And it spoke in this Polish fairy tale book about this water demon, this water spirit, this water creature. And it would lure like young women out with like a pretty flower, or a boy with a frog and on a lily pad, and that it was known to make noises like animals, like a herding animal or herding cow, and to draw you in, or even sound and mock the voice of a human. And then when you got close, it snatched you and it pulled you into an extra dimensional space. And the story went on. It was really fascinating story. Maybe I'll recite it for you guys sometime, best I can remember it. But it spoke about, got a hold of a clever human, a clever boy who worked on this farm, and he had the gift of cleverness and intuition, and ended up escaping and let go all these souls that were like trapped, that this thing had trapped in these jars. And he said that when he let them go, they turned into white doves and flew away. Very cool, right? Very cool story. Very fascinating, but very eerie. And I remember when I was reading it, I actually got scared right in the middle. I wasn't scared of anybody in that prison. I was scared of what I had experienced right down there at that drain pipe with my cousin. And it's no joke. It really happened. And can you explain it? Not really. Can you try to understand it? You can try. You can maybe look at the science, the knowledge, the legends, the stories, the words long written down. Ask yourself what you believe, what you don't believe. Find it in your heart, find it in your spirit. Remember that it's okay to feel. It's okay to experience. It's funny, I think and talk to a lot of old-time people. I love people in their 80s, 90s. The older they are, the greater they are to me. I have much respect for my elders, and I like to collect their stories. I like to listen because they just are so different than everybody around, especially when they're not connected to the internet. They're just so different. It's something I can't really explain. You can only experience. And old farmers would talk about these creatures they used to talk about in the 50s that were, they would take the shape of human form when it would rain because they could never go too far away from water. And when they would come in, they were always drenching, soaking wet. It's like no matter how many towels or whatever, they would, just always be wet. And as the one story went in the Polish fairy tale book, the farmer gave him towels, and he just wouldn't dry off, and he kept asking to use the phone. But when the farmer, offered for him to use the phone, he just kept, working his way around it. He had a young daughter and a young boy, and it turned out that the thing had came for the young boy. In a lot of Indian legends, they talk about these things called mound walkers, and how these mound walkers would bring these children gifts of, straw, like straw things, that dolls, and little gifts of toys, and then they would eventually snatch their kids and take them away. You hear other stories of a creature, a cryptid called a changeling. There's a movie with Angelina Jolie, and I think it's called Changeling. You got to ask yourself again where the stories come from. And I read stories in that Polish fairy tale book about forests, man, where they talk about changelings and people getting their kids snatched and replaced with a thing that looks like a child but is actually a shape-shifting creature. But it is so beyond a human to say that shape-shifting could actually happen. You could actually transform. Something could transform. You're like, no, that's all make-believe. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not make-believe. Here's a really good example of to stretch your imagination and start opening your eyes. Really famous guy who did comic books. I'm not going to mention any name. Really famous guy. I hope that he rests in peace and goes to a place of great honor. He would study people like this. People that could run electrical currents through their bodies. They could hang off of a transistor and never blow apart. It would just run through their body. He's a superhuman. People that can their muscles produce so much torque and their bones are just harder than everyone else's that they can bend a frying pan in two. Superhuman. There's a person that, this lady, I think it is, that can dive underwater, and as long as it's freezing cold, that would just basically destroy another person. She can swim for like 18 minutes or something crazy, right? It's something just absolutely ridiculous, and it's just the way your blood flows. It's simple. It's very simple science, but hard human logic, because it defies what you've just been taught and what you think about logic. So, with that being said, ask yourself what hole we went in. And remember, sometimes places, all the time places. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like, hit that subscribe, ring my bell, send me a message. This has been another episode of Freaky Friday. I hope you guys enjoy. And remember, boys and girls, say all your prayers.